Hello and welcome to Focus on Israel and the Palestinian Territories. My name is Paul Calvert. Proverbs 16 verse 31 says this: "The silver-haired head is a crown of glory, if it is found in the way of righteousness." I'm with Walter Bingham, who's an Israeli journalist. First of all, Walter, how old are you?
Well, I suppose I should say 93, but in a couple of months, if God gives me, I shall be 94.
And I understand that you're the world's oldest talk show host.
Yeah, I have the Guinness World Record, oldest radio talk show host in the world.
And did you get a certificate for that?
I have a certificate, yes. It's a very imposing one, and I have a photograph on the wall here with the President of Israel just holding the certificate. Wow. I'm waiting to get an interview with him, but it hasn't come off so far.
Yeah. Now, how many shows do you make a week?
Well, I work for 3 radio stations, really. One I've been working for since before I came to Israel, which is nearly 14 years. And that's Israel National Radio or Israel National News, and I do one a week for them, 52 minutes. And I also, since about a year and a bit, broadcast for a news station called Israel News Talk Radio. That's a Fox News affiliate, and they get 40 minutes a week. And the first program I told you about is also heard on a small Jewish station in Melbourne, Australia.
So you've never thought about retiring?
Sorry, what did you say? What does that mean? Never retire. Yeah. Look, if I sit in a rocking chair, I'll die. Yeah. Occasionally I have to get away from the computer because I do my own editing and everything else. But eventually I have to get away from the computer and sit on my chair, which rocks a bit, and I watch TV and then I fall asleep. And I'm determined that that's not going to be my life.
Yeah. Now, you made Aliyah, you moved to Israel. How old were you when you moved to Israel?
I came when I was 80. And it was very interesting because I had previously done some work for Israel National Radio. That's Channel 7 here. It's, of course, now all on the internet. Used to be live and people call in, but now it's all on a podcast. And I did some work for them before I came, and they said, well, why don't you do a 10-minute slot for us? You're preparing to come to emigrate, to make Aliyah, as we call it. Why don't you tell us what you have to do to prepare for it? I mean, there's so much to do when you leave your home in which you've been for 60-odd years. And I did that, and I told them what I was doing every week. And then when I came, they said, "You're really here? And now why don't you do 3 more programs, 3 more weeks, how you find all your documents and how you settle in Israel?" And I did that, and I must tell you that that they told me in England at the offices of immigration for Israel that I should take a very thick book if I go to the Ministry of the Interior here to try and get my papers, because it's a long wait. Well, I was in and out of there in 30 minutes. So that was one good thing. Then they said, well, in Israel, you have to have sharp elbows because people are very rude and they push you around and you can't get on a bus, as that used to be very many years ago. And I found that everybody was very helpful. I couldn't say a bad word about my experiences when I first came. In fact, in a supermarket, I couldn't read the stuff. I couldn't know which is which and what's what. And I asked people, and they helped me. And then they said, anything else I can help you with? So everything was very nice and very friendly. And I'm settled in, and I'm happy here, and it's the best thing I ever did in my life.
Was it difficult leaving Great Britain and coming to here at 80 years of age?
Not at all. My daughter was already living here, and I had a grandson living here. So I was in London, and I had another grandson there. But I thought, I'm getting old. I should be somewhere close to my daughter, because you can't really be a burden to a grandson, can you, if anything happens. So I eventually moved here, and so here I am.
Yeah. Now, you're originally from Germany, but came to Great Britain in 1939. How did that happen, that you came to Great Britain?
Well, there was such a thing as called Kindertransport. That's a collective name, an umbrella term, really. It was that the British authorities were finally persuaded to take some children out of Germany after long negotiations. I have a gripe with the British, though, I must say, and that is that it was unaccompanied children without their parents. Now, I was fortunate. There was somebody in each town who played God, and they said, they decided who goes for various reasons. And I was chosen, and I came. Lots of organizations had an input. Some children went to foster parents, others went to family, others went into hostels. I went, because I came with the Zionist youth movement, into something that was almost like a kibbutz. In Wales, it was a wonderful castle, Griff Castle in Abergele, near on the North Wales coast. It was beautiful, with the lawns down to the Irish Sea, and lambing I could see every season. But the inside was rotten. We had no sanitation. I don't want to talk about it. That was awful. But I came to Britain and I was happy to be there. But unaccompanied children, that's I want to tell you about. You must imagine a mother sending her only, and I was an only child, sending her only child to England. All she knew is that I was going to England with some youth organization. Not where, not how, not what. And it was about just under 4 weeks before the outbreak of World War II, and the Jews knew what was coming, because there was 6 years of experience before that. And you put yourself into the shoes of a parent who sent their children out, knowing full well that war is imminent, and they will probably not see them again. And in fact, I would say 99% of children who went with the Kindertransport, and it was scheduled to be 10,000, but about 7,500, I think, made it before the outbreak of war. And 99% of children never, ever saw their parents again. I must say, God was good to me. I was fortunate that my mother, who went through the concentration camps, came out alive, and that we reunited again, which was, of course, wonderful. My father had already perished in the Warsaw Ghetto. So that was the story of the Kindertransport. But to send children away, there were some younger children who said, "What have I done to my mommy and daddy that they're sending me away? I was a good girl, I was a good boy, why am I sent away?" So can you imagine the cruel, in the process of being kind, it was cruel.
Yeah. Now, being Jewish, did that actually save your life?
Well, they were mainly Jewish. There were 1 or 2 non-Jewish children, perhaps children of known communists or other anti-Nazi system people, but it was mainly Jewish children on this Kindertransport.
Now, you were a driver in British Royal Army Service Corps, and you were in the invasion of Normandy. Tell us a little bit about that.
I was in the Royal Army Service Corps after my training, and then I was posted to drive ducks, DUKWs. They're those trucks which are shaped like ships, have a propeller, in order to unload ships, ship to shore. Interestingly, the tires you could inflate and deflate while you were driving, because if you get out back from the sea onto sand, you needed a large surface of tire. You soften them. If you get on tarmac, you harden them. And you needed, they had 6 feet in front of the front wheels. So if you had to really know how to get round the corner. And then I did something you should never do in the British Army. I volunteered for something. Somebody came, we were all on parade, and somebody came and they wanted drivers for ambulances. And my wheels started turning. I thought, my goodness, in those ducks, those ship truck things, we're 5 knots in the water. We'll be sitting ducks at the invasion and the German Air Force will bomb us to hell. I better volunteer. And I did that great mistake and took a step forward and volunteered. I thought, now I get a Red Cross armband and I'll be fine. Well, as it happened, the German Air Force was nowhere to be seen at the invasion, and those ships, those trucks, ducks, they were having a good time on the canals of Belgium and Holland. And with my ambulance, I was sent to the 43rd Division, 130 Field Ambulance, and I was stationed in front of the front lines, in dugouts. And so I saw a very bloody war.
And I understand you actually won a military medal as well.
Well, that was during that period. It was Hill 112. We were on Hill 112, which was the pivotal battle of Normandy. And there I was, as I said, in front of the infantry, between the infantry and the anti-tank regiment. Anti-tank regiment were trying to destroy German Tiger tanks who were dug in with only the barrel showing. But of course the German tanks were far superior to anything we had, and this anti-tank unit was shot up terribly. I mean terribly. So somebody came running back to me, not far, I wasn't that far behind, in the dugout next to my doctor, next to my ambulance orderly, and said, "Come and help." So I took my ambulance and I drove forward, and I tried to help to evacuate those wounded, to load them up. And the major who was in charge of that anti-tank battery or regiment or whatever they were helped me to load, and the next thing I saw, his head was over there and his legs were somewhere else. So he got torn to pieces by... We were facing not only the Tiger tanks with their 88mm guns, but also what was called moaning minis. I think there were 8 mortars or 12 mortars, and each one had a different whistle as it came. That's why we called them moaning minis, to work on our morale. And machine guns, I think, and we were shot up very badly. So and then we crawled under a Bren gun carrier, which is something on tracks, and it had a bit of clearance underneath, and we dived under that. But my ambulance orderly caught it. He got shrapnel in his back, and I lost him. And so I was alone, and no ambulance. The ambulance was destroyed. And I crawled back in the way that I was taught at my basic training. It all came back to me, a special way of getting back. Quite a long way to headquarters, and I secured another ambulance, and I went back. And with that second ambulance, I managed to evacuate quite a lot of the wounded men that weren't already dead. And that was noticed. Of course, so many other soldiers did things like that weren't noticed. Unfortunately, my action was noticed, and I was awarded the military medal.
And you also got a letter from the king as well.
Well, I have a letter from the king because in the normal course of events you'd get it at Buckingham Palace. But as I was still fighting in Normandy, I was given it in front of the whole division by the divisional commander in the field, which was quite interesting.
Could you see God protecting your life, even though you're seeing friends around you dying?
Never entered my head. Hadn't time to think about those things. You just had to think about survival, how best to survive, what to do. Of course, I want to tell you something. I was a sort of, call it a refugee soldier. I wasn't even British at the time. I was still hadn't been naturalized. But there's a difference between the ordinary British squaddie, the ordinary British soldier, and people like myself. The difference is that the British soldier was there either because he had to, he was called up, or he wanted to fight for his country. Well, I didn't have a country to fight for. I was new in England. Admittedly, they accepted me and gave me shelter, but it was not my country. And I had no country at all to fight for. So what I fought I fought against. I fought to defeat the enemy, to find my family, which was the motivation that drove lots of people like me to do things beyond the normal.
And you got the opportunity to work in British intelligence as well.
Well, I was bilingual German. I still am. And so I agitated. I said, look, anybody can drive an ambulance with a bit of training. I mean, you did need some training because people you had in the back of your ambulance, every little bump would hurt, so you had to drive carefully. But anybody with this training could drive an ambulance. But I speak German. We're going into Germany. Come on, you need German speakers. But they wouldn't release me because every unit was under strength. We lost a lot of men. Well, eventually they agreed. And I was at Eindhoven in Holland. And the next big battle was the battle at Arnhem over the bridge over the River Rhine, where we British were decimated, and the paratroops landed wrongly, and everything went wrong, but I wasn't there anymore. I got out just before, otherwise maybe I'm not here to tell the tale. And I was sent back to London. Anybody knows London, the Oxford Circus, the Four Corners. One corner, today is some fashion shop, was a 4-story department store called Peter Robinson. And under the roof of that department store, through the staff entrance, was a secret office for documents. I was trained as a document specialist, and when I was trained, I was sent to HQ Intelligence Corps in Brussels, where I did very little, waiting for work. And then when Hamburg fell to the British, I was sent to Hamburg with another colleague and a pickup truck. And we were expected to look at every Nazi document in the whole of the Hamburg area. It was an impossible task, of course, because it wasn't only the army, or it wasn't only SS or Gestapo. There were so many paramilitary organizations of which most listeners have never heard of. But we chose where we thought we'd go. The Middlesex Regiment guarded all the Nazi offices. And we went where we wanted to go and checked on the documents. And eventually I did other work. The tailor in Hamburg was asked to make me a civilian suit. I hated to wear it because the material was so bad that it itched, and I didn't want to wear it. I was also allowed to wear officer's insignia. My rank was sergeant. And I had eventually an open blue BMW car. And I did all kinds of other work. The most interesting event, I interviewed Nazis and other things, but the most interesting person that I came across, and the highest ranking Nazi, was the German foreign minister, Joachim von Ribbentrop, who incidentally was the first to hang. He was the first to hang after the Nuremberg war crimes trials. Now, they brought him into my office. He was in army uniform because they took off his civilian clothes in case he was hiding some poison, and so they gave him something different to wear. He was tall, good-looking, unshaven, and I had a camera, a very complicated camera, a Contax, like a Leica, if anybody knows about cameras, which you had to set manually, and the best of the best at the time. I took it off the Japanese consul in Hamburg, and I said, you don't mind if I take that as a present from you? The gold cigarette case that came with it, he complained I had to give that back. But with this camera, I wanted to photograph Ribbentrop. And he said, do you mind if I have a shave first? And I said, sit down, just like that. And a colleague of mine who wanted to take a picture of me and this Nazi also tried, and neither of us could work this camera, and no pictures came out, which is rather sad. Now, I asked, they brought him into my office because they knew I wanted to know about the Jewish connections, the destruction of Jews, extermination of Jews. And I asked him about that, and this man had the gall to say to me, I didn't know anything about that. It was the Führer, Hitler. And I said, so you know now? He said, well, the first I heard about it was when I read it in the called Hamburger Nachrichtenblatt, Hamburg information sheet, which was a double-sided piece of newspaper published by the British in German. And that man wanted to tell me that that was the first he heard, when he was really in charge of getting all the Nazi organizations in the different countries they occupied to round up the Jews. Well, he got his comeuppance anyway. And then I did lots of other work.
You actually witnessed the burning of books as well by Nazi Germany.
Well, that was in 1933, where there was an instruction to all libraries to deliver up big prescribed list of books all about Jews, written by Jews and achievements of Jews and so on, maybe also a few communists. And they had to bring them in my town to the Castle Park. They set up a big bonfire, and then all civilians were told that they must look at this list, and any books they have at home like that, they have to bring them to this event when they were going to be burned. If they don't, then they would be for the high jump. And so I went there. I was a young boy, and I went and I looked at it, and I saw it. And the German people happily threw the German culture onto the bonfire. And that's something very interesting. The Time magazine at the turn of the century in America asked its listeners to tell them whom they think was the person who contributed most to the 20th century. Well, obviously, people said Martin Luther King, others said Nelson Mandela, somebody said Elvis Presley, and different people were mentioned. Who do you think was chosen? Einstein, whose books were burned in 1933. So it was realized later that Einstein contributed so much to our sciences, the basis of sciences. That was the book burning.
So you came to the UK in 1939, which must mean that you were actually at Kristallnacht when that happened in Germany. What happened there?
That happened in 1938. Well, what happened first of all is, of course, on the night from the 9th to the 10th of November 1938, 1,000 or more synagogues were burned in Germany, Austria, and the by then occupied Sudetenland, part of the western part of Czechoslovakia, which the Germans had already got. 30,000 Jewish men were sent to concentration camps, and a lot of German property was destroyed. Now, you might ask, why was it just at that particular night? But the story goes, you need to watch the timeline. The story goes back to 1938, the so-called Anschluss, which the takeover of Austria by the Nazis in 1938. Now, there were many Polish Jews there, and the Polish government was now concerned that all those Polish Jews will want to come home, run away from the Germans, come home to Poland, because it was still peacetime. And they didn't want the Jews. So they issued a denationalization law, which said that any Pole living outside of Poland for more than 5 years needs to have a stamp in the passports. When the Jews went to the consulate, they were refused a stamp. No Jews got a stamp, which meant that overnight all these so-called Polish Jews became stateless. No passport, no country, no protection, nothing. Now, what can you do with a stateless mass of people? Because the policy of the Nazis at the time was not yet the actual extermination of Jews. That came later after the Wannsee Conference. It was get rid of them, let them get them out of the country. Of course, nobody wanted to take us in. That's another story. But get out. So now what are they going to do with this mass of stateless Jews that they had on their plate? And later on in the year, Himmler, the Gestapo and police chief, decided to forcefully deport all those Polish Jews to Poland. That was much later in the year, but it started in March of that year. Well, on the 28th of October, 1938, they rounded up all the Polish Jews, put them into sealed trains, and send them to the Polish border. The Poles wouldn't let them in. They didn't want any Jews. The Germans wanted to push them across the border, and so they were there for about 3 nights in no man's land. You can imagine the situation and the conditions. Well, there was a family from Hanover in Germany called Grinspan. This family contacted they were also there. They contacted their son, called Herschel. He was 17 years old and lived illegally in Paris. He got so livid, so upset, that his parents had to go through that ordeal, that he got himself a gun, pistol, and went to the German embassy and asked for the ambassador. Well, you can't so easily see an ambassador. So he was taken to the third secretary, Ernst vom Rath. And when this young boy, Herschel Grinspan, 17 years old boy, faced this German diplomat, he drew the pistol and shot him. And vom Rath died 2 days later of his wounds. Now, timeline, that was 28th of October when his parents were sent off. 9th of November, a few days later, was the Kristallnacht. In the meantime, the guy died. And that was the trigger to set in motion the biggest pogrom against Jews before the actual Holocaust itself. And it was absolutely prepared because all the Nazi organizations in every town had already letters of instruction that when the day comes, when they give the okay, they set it in motion, because you couldn't otherwise do what they've done. So it was publicized as a spontaneous uprising of the German people because of the killing of the German diplomat by a Jew, but in fact it was all prepared and was just waiting for an occasion to set in motion. And that occasion was, of course, after the man was shot, and a couple of days later was the 9th of November. Wow. That was Kristallnacht.
Now later you had a career in journalism in Britain and also been an actor as well.
Yes, I thought that would be a good idea to get into journalism. There was a radio station advertising for somebody to man their telephones in the studio where people call in. I applied and got the job. What the job was to ask the caller what you want to talk about. You know the story when you listen to talk to maybe LBC in London or other talk shows. And I did that, and occasionally the host would ask me to comment also. And that's how it started. It was my first, and that's how it started. And then later on, decided to give me my own show, and I'd also written for the papers. And that's how it developed. I liked it. I was obviously good at it. And broadcast in England, here and there. And the rest is history, really.
Did you get to interview some interesting people?
It was mostly call-in shows, talk shows at that time. Here in Israel, I had some very interesting people on my shows. Some were just benign interviews with interesting authors reviewing their books, and then there are confrontational interviews, which are fun, but you have to know how to handle them. And I had 1 or 2 of those. And I'm enjoying myself. I mean, I've meeting so many, certainly in Israel, now in my later life, because, you know, when you're old, like I am, you can get away with a lot of things that you can't when you are younger. So, and I'm using that. Yeah. So that I have some advantages. A disadvantage to be old, of course. You know, in Jerusalem, all roads only go uphill, because it's a very hilly town. All roads only go up, and every week they get steeper. Yeah. and going and stairs. There's a lot of places you go down millions of stairs and hills. And it's very bad. But I want to say that on a good day, I feel like 40, and on a bad day, like 50. So that's not bad, is it?
And you've also got involved in acting as well. What sort of things have you been acting?
The acting was in England. I had to make a living, and journalism and radio didn't pay that well. So I grew, I don't know, out of fun, a very large beard. I had an enormous beard. And somebody suggested that beard could earn me money. So I went to a few of theatrical agents, presented myself, and, I'm a bit of an extrovert and I can talk. So they liked me. And I was on the books of 6 agents and got a lot of work, advertising work, documentaries, and a few films, including Harry Potter, where I was a wizard, nothing special. I was in the first one, and then in the second one I had a somewhat better part. Nothing much really. If you blink, you miss me. But and I was actually in Los Angeles and phoned back on a Friday for the shoot on Sunday. I said, I'll be back on Sunday, straight from the airport. And they said, sorry, Walter, we've changed the schedule. We are filming today. So I missed that number. Although I was measured up for clothes and so on, I missed number 2. And then I did again number 3. And then I came to Israel. If I hadn't gone, I suppose I would have been in every film. Maybe I would have got nicer parts where you wouldn't have to blink. But and then I played in documentaries. I played Darwin. I did all kinds of. I have them all here. What else did I do? Adverts and things for the newspapers. That's it. It's a pity this isn't TV, otherwise I'd show it to you.
What's the key to long life?
Well, here in the Middle East, they eat a lot of garlic. And so I tell people, sit down, hold on to your chair, and then I say, no garlic. And then they fall off the chair. I hate the stuff. I run a mile from it. Everything's got garlic. Whoever invites me, I have a problem to eat the food unless they know I'm coming. Then they might do a salad, a little bit from the salad that's got no garlic in a special dish. But really and truly, I am blessed by God. I have good genes. I don't know why, but it's all genes, because I still eat what I want. I put on a little bit of weight. I used to be very slim. Now I have middle-aged spread, of course. But I more or less eat everything. And if I see cholesterol, I go for it. Sugar, I go for it. Salt, I love it. I'm just blessed to be very healthy. And I don't know. People ask me, what about your parents? What about the lifespan of your parents? Well, unfortunately, my father, as I told you, died as a young man. He died in the Warsaw Ghetto. My mother came through the camps and developed a brain tumor, which is not surprising. So she didn't live to anything like it. And I had an aunt who lived in Israel, and she died just before she was 101. But 101 when you're nearly 94 is too fast, isn't it? It's too quick. People in Israel, there is a habit in Israel to wish you up to 120, which is the life of Moses. And when they say that, I stop them. I'm thinking back to the Twin Towers in New York. The accident. That was 16 years ago, and I think 16 years is like yesterday for me. So another 25 years to 120, that's far too quick. I don't want that. I so far, I'm feeling fine, and I can't imagine a world. My daughter says, you're arrogant, because I keep saying I can't imagine a world without me. But I can't. I'm enjoying life, and when you get older, although I am working strenuously to make the deadlines, but when you get older, you still find time to do all the things you always wanted to do and never had time for, because I am not under such pressure. If I don't want to do a show one week, I send them an old one that nobody's heard yet, something from England or And so I take the week off.
And finally, you actually have a flying license as well, don't you?
Yeah, I got my pilot's license in 1968. And, you know, it's like building blocks. First you can just fly alone, and then you can take passengers, and then you can fly by night. You have to build it up. You get different tests. And in the end, I had the highest licenses that one could have. Flying blind, in cloud, above cloud, in airways, as high as my little aeroplane would take me. And I went all over Europe, and once I flew to Israel. And you know, a pilot's license isn't worth anything unless you have a medical. And a medical is not just from any doctor, it's from the Civil Aviation Authority's medical branch. And I get mine in Gatwick. And my last medical was issued in February this year, which means I'm licensed because it's valid for a year. So I'm their oldest pilot, they say. They haven't got anybody older than me, you know, getting on for 94. Unbelievably, I can't believe it myself because I as I told you, I personally feel much younger. Anyway, so I have a problem with the flying here. The Israelis are a bit funny, but in England, I have no problem.
Okay, Walter, thank you very much for sharing your life.
It was a great pleasure, and I wish all your listeners should have a life like I had. Multifaceted, some bad, everybody has to have bad spots, and some good, but a long life.
If you'd like to know more about our show, you can join us on Facebook. Just look for Focus on Israel-Radio. Ezekiel 37 verse 4-6 says this, "Again he said to me, prophesy to these bones, and say to them, O dry bones, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God of these bones, surely I will cause breath to enter into you, and you shall live. I will put sinners on you, and bring flesh upon you, cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live. Then you shall know that I am the Lord." And the Jews will receive the real shalom peace.